Everything going. Okay, perfect. Devale Ellis, you know you are the next Black father for people on social media. How does that feel?
And that feels great, to be honest. It's an honor. I enjoy it. I embrace it. I enjoy fatherhood. I always knew I wanted to be a dad. I was a mentor for 14 years when I first retired from the NFL. So I have a lot of young men who are now grown who call me dad, look at me as a father. So I embrace, having my own four children.
Nice, I love that. And before we get into fatherhood, in a ex-NFL TV star, all these things, who is Val as just a Black man in America? Who is that person at the core when it comes to how you wake up, how you navigate life, how you deal with everything?
Wow, that's a great question. When I was in college, my professor, my sophomore year, asked me to write a mission statement for myself, and I wrote this mission statement. Each day, I work to build a legacy, not to be defined by my greatness, but by the masses I inspire to be greater than myself. And I try to live like that every single day. Like what's the point of living if you can't inspire people to be better, if you can't make the world a greater place? I know it sounds like the most cliche thing ever, but if you really think about life in its essence and to its core, it's like getting a lot of stuff, having a lot of money doesn't really mean anything unless you can change the world with it. So that's the vow. I just want to change the world. I want everybody to be happy. I want everybody to win. I just want us to see the world differently and have empathy for each other.
Nice. I love it. I know you talk about empathy, emotional intelligence, and everything. When did that become a thing for you, especially as a Black man, to really make sure that you express yourself in a way that others can comprehend and you understand how to communicate that your thoughts, your emotions got across rather than people having blockers thinking, this is just another Black man saying something. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, actually, it started for me at an extremely young age. I was always very argumentative, and my mom was like, "Man, you're gonna be a lawyer when you grow up because you just won't shut your mouth." Right. And my argument to that was like, I just want things to be fair.
Yeah.
We don't have to agree. I just want to be understood. Don't just silence me because I'm your child. My professors and my teachers in middle school, like, don't just silence me because I'm a child. I have a perspective. So with that, growing up, I had to learn how to get my perspective across the right way, and it takes time. I remember doing interviews very early in my career. I did a segment, forgot the name of the segment, but my words were constantly being taken out of context,
Mm-hmm.
and I realized that that wasn't other people's fault. That was my fault because I didn't understand the power of my words and I didn't know how to convey my emotions properly. So rather than judging and blaming people for taking my words and using them for whatever they wanted to, I said, how could I perfect my craft of oratory? How could I convey my message in the most cleanest way possible so that it can come across the way I want it to be taken?
Nice. I love that. What was your method for that? That other people, not just Black men, but people in general can understand how to communicate effectively. I have that with my husband all the time. I'm like, you're not saying what you're really trying to say. What are you trying to say? Because it's definitely
Right.
making sense. And a friend's like, Mike, you're the type where you will pinpoint the only logical part of someone's argument and everything
Yes,
goes to the side. I said, because that's the only part I can understand.
absolutely. But this is the key to that is understand. This is what fatherhood has taught me. Understanding and having empathy for other people allow you, because communicating is a lot more about listening and speaking.
Mhm.
So what I've learned to do is listen to people first to try to understand where they're coming from. So it's like, okay, I get your perspective. Let me convey my message to you through your lens.
Mhm.
But if I don't have the patience to listen to people first, how could I ever convey a message to them? So rather than jumping out the gate first and be like, I want to get my point across. No, let me understand where you're coming from first. And being a father actually taught me that because children have a perspective as well. And when I used to try to convey things to Jackson, I used to be screaming. I won't even say toxic. I'll say I was radioactive
Yeah.
because I was young. I was a 27-year-old dad, and I was just everything I learned about life. I wanted him to learn at 3 years old. So I'm screaming, cursing. Every father figure I had in my life who helped me be successful. I took parts of them. I took parts of my football coaches, my basketball coaches, my dad, because my dad is my hero. My father is my biggest inspiration, my grandfather. But I took pieces of them and I was just trying to throw it all at my son at the same time. And it wasn't until I started listening to him that I was able to actually convey across him what I wanted him to learn.
Nice. Why do you think even I know you were young at 27, but why did you want him even at such an early ages to get the world? Was it more of a kind of like I want to make sure you as a young black kid growing up understands it, or was that more of like the vow projecting on him?
Oh, it was fear.
Yeah.
It was fear. I grew up fearing bullies. I grew up as a latchkey kid. You know, from the time I was 8 years old, I had to pick up my little brother Brian, who was 6, and we had to walk home from school and be in the house until 6:30 when my parents come home. I was in charge at 8, and my biggest fear was being picked on. I remember being jumped in third grade by a couple of middle school kids who tried to steal my jacket. And my brother Brian jumped in there, and we fighting these middle school kids. I'm in 5th grade, he's in 3rd grade. And, you know, it was my fears. Like, I never want anybody to take advantage of someone I love.
Yeah.
So when I had, by the way, they didn't get the jacket. Like, me and my brother put hands on it. Like, my father put us in karate from early. And I just never wanted my sons to ever have that feeling like they weren't able to defend themselves.
Mhm.
And ultimately, I became the bully
Yeah. Wow.
because I was just projecting onto my son all of my fears, and like, don't do this, watch out for this, don't do that, don't be soft, don't be this, don't be that, don't be a wimp, don't be a punk. And I started to watch my son shrivel and shrivel and shrivel. And it wasn't until he was about 8. So we're talking about 4 years ago.
Wow.
Like, this is still very, very recent.
Yeah.
It wasn't until he was about 8 that I realized I was causing more damage and more harm to him. But it was all out of fear. You know, I just want my sons to be strong enough to handle what the world is.
Nice. I love that. I've had my own thing of, black man to black man because I always want
Mm-hmm.
people to be doing the best. And I said, dang,
Mm-hmm.
controlling. Everybody say, Mike, you're controlling. Like, I want you to
Yes.
be good, like excellent. I said, that's a high standard that my parents, my dad raised me to, do.
Right.
I had all A's, came in with a B in piano. I could not learn piano at all, but I have muscle memory. So I said, Dad,
Right.
yeah, I got it. He said, you got a B though. I said, but everybody else was like, not getting B's like me in
Yep.
piano. He said, you're a black man. You can't be just average. You got to. So I realized I was projecting that. So I understand.
Absolutely. That was my mom. That was and the funny thing is, parents do things differently with each child.
Yeah.
Like, I was the child that learned easily. You know, I love to read, so grades were easy. I would get 90s and everything. If I got an 80, I'd be like, I don't care, I got an 80. My mom took me out of basketball because I got an 80, and she said it was because of my lack of effort, not because of the grade. But at 12, I didn't understand that.
Mhm.
So I had a lot of resentment, and I felt like everyone was always coming on me or picking at me. And all of that, the chip on my shoulder, I threw all of that on my first son, Jackson. And what I spend a lot of time now apologizing to him and saying, bro, a lot of the anxiety you have at 11 and 12 to just be perfect comes from me. And I said, so stop asking yourself, because I could see in his eyes, like, he would ask, like, why do I get so emotional when I fail? Why do I feel like anything short of perfection is just a loss? And I said, I did that to you. Don't ask yourself, you're not strange, you're not weird. I did that to you. And I'm gonna help you fix it. So we work on that together.
Nice. I love that. Speaking of, you said earlier that you get from all these different, father figures and male figures in your life,
Mm-hmm.
right? How important is that when you're raising these, young black boys that you see that it's so important? I mean, it sounds like the rhetoric we always say, but like,
Right.
the product of that, it's like, hey, you know what? Even if your dad isn't around, you need to have an uncle, your mom needs to have a best friend. There
Yes.
needs to be that male figure that pours back into you that only another man can do.
Yes. Absolutely. I agree with that. And that doesn't take away from the women in their lives, because my mentorship program, I've mentored and trained over 500 young black men and women from 2010 to 2019, right? And 75% of those families were single black women.
Mhm.
And I watched these women do everything. But I've also watched the families who had dads in their lives just excel. And I even had a couple of single black dads. One thing I did notice is that regardless of whether you had a single parent home or you were in a dual parent home, if your father was in the home, you were just way more successful. Those kids who had fathers, and even though they were single fathers, were more disciplined. They had a little bit more emotional awareness and emotional intelligence, but those men were very deliberate about making sure that their children saw that. You know, because men are more stoic,
Yes.
and I think it's social conditioning that we tend to be more stoic, where we allow our women to have more access to their emotions and expel those emotions. So when you're a single mom and you're constantly expelling your emotions because that's what you do, for a lot of young boys and young women, they're just like, okay, that's how adults are.
Yeah.
But then when you have a dad in the house and the dad is a little bit more even keel, it's like, okay, so I can be emotional, but I can also learn how to control my emotions.
Yeah.
So I feel like having a father in the home is just that balance. You know, it's just that balance. And it allows them to see a different type of strength that we don't see in media,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to Black men. You know, the type of images they project of Black men in media are not what the reality is in the world.
No, I love that. When it came to you transitioning into fatherhood, what's something outside of, you've already told me about all the things you've learned that you projected. What's something you learned about you that you didn't even know was there, like a capacity that you didn't know that you had or didn't never tapped into?
I didn't know I had the capacity to be vulnerable. Like my biggest thing, like we just talked about being stoic. My grandfather, who was in the Navy, fought in the Korean War. I never saw my grandfather cry until he was on his deathbed. And shout out to Charles Edward Ellis the first, because there's a child that was Edward Ellis Jr. But he was suffering from COPD, and he had got to a point where my grandmother, who was his life partner, and they did everything together. She's still suffering from dementia now, but she was like gone mentally, and he took care of her until he couldn't anymore. And she had to go into a home, and I kind of watched him go into a release. Well, you know, my wife is okay. Now that my wife is okay, it's okay for me to leave. And he only thing he said during the last 2 hours was, Lord have mercy. And to my father, Troy, let me go. And as all of his grandkids and great grandkids and cousins and stuff came around the bed to watch him leave, I watched tears go down his eyes for the first time ever in my life. And in those vulnerable moments, I watched my dad cry for only the second time in my life. And that was a message to me, was like, you know, how can I expect my sons to open up to me and be vulnerable when I ask them what's wrong if I don't show them vulnerability?
Nice.
Because for years I was asking Jackson, what's the matter? What's the matter? Don't tell me what's wrong. And he'd be like, nothing's wrong. And in here, in my mind, I'm like, dude, I'm asking you what's wrong. It's clear that I can see something is wrong. You're on the brink of tears, but you won't say it. And then it was like, duh, Devale, you don't ever cry or be vulnerable in front of your kids. So I was like, shoot. So I'll never forget the day. This was 2020, 2021. We just moved to Atlanta. And I was struggling with Jackson in basketball, trying to get him to open up. And I said, freak it, I'm going to just open up. And I just started crying. And he's like, Dad, what's the matter? And I said, I feel like I'm failing you.
Wow.
And he was like, why would you feel like you're failing me? I said, because I can't get you to open up to me, which means you don't feel comfortable and safe in my presence. As a father, I'm failing you. And I started crying. He started crying, grabbed me and said, Dad, it's okay. You don't have to be perfect. And then I said to him, exactly, Jackson. If I don't have to be perfect, you don't have to be perfect neither. And he said, I don't? I said, no, you don't. You're learning. We're learning together. You're my first son. I'm going to make mistakes. And he was like, you make mistakes? And it was real, like, it was a realization to me. Like, me being vulnerable in that moment allowed my son to be vulnerable and not act all stoic. And ever since that day, I tell you, our relationship has been like wide open. His anxiety with basketball is going away. With football, if he loses a game, he's not throwing himself on the ground and getting upset. He's just like, it's part of the process. I'll get him next time. And I'm like, I'm even getting emotional now thinking about it, because I could have really destroyed my son and destroyed his spirit doing what I was doing.
No, that's beautiful. You get me emotional too. I don't even have kids, but I say that with joy because we talk about generational trauma, and that's breaking that. You know what I mean, that's really breaking it. And I think sometimes we think that trauma should be it should be overt, right? It should be just evident for us. But
right,
those are the things where it's not evident, where it's like it's the nonverbal things. It's what we're not paying attention
to. Talk about it, Mike. That people automatically assume generational trauma is sexual abuse, alcohol abuse, verbal, physical beatings. No, sometimes generational trauma is not being vulnerable and having emotional intelligence with your children, not allowing your children to have a point of view and an opinion. That's generational trauma. Mm-hmm. Because what that also does, because I've watched this as well, if that child doesn't have an opinion their whole life and you tell them what to do, now they're 18, they graduate from high school, now they're in college and things are happening around them, the first thing they're gonna do is look at their parents. What do I do? Your parents can't save you.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say, what's wrong with these kids? They don't know how to be adults. No, they don't, because you never allowed them to fail and work to them and walk them through that failure. And that's what I just don't want to have. I want my sons to fail and fail a lot when they're young, when the stakes aren't as high,
Yeah.
so that they learn how to deal with failure and pick themselves back up.
No, definitely. We have 10 minutes. Like I always like to do a time check just because I want
Okay, bet.
to. But what you're saying is so true because me and my husband, we come from different. He come from Compton. He come from a whole different thing. And when we got together, I used to ask questions. He'd be like, "Oh, it's cool. It's this. It's that." And I used to get frustrated. I said, "Why don't you like describe it?" I said, "Wait, did you grow up in a household where you were asked your opinion on something?" I grew up where my mom would be like, "How do you like this? Because I'll change it up if you don't." He's like, "Nope, man, it was not an ask. You didn't ask. You just took what you got, and there it is." I said, "Wow."
Yep.
I said, "Wow." And speaking of that upbringing, since we're talking about fatherhood, what's something you want new fathers to understand, especially because I think I know there's always these thoughts of like what I should be as a father and what my kid needs, but what's something you've learned through this journey that you're like, hey, honestly, throw it all out the window?
One thing I've learned, and in partnership with my wife, because that's the first thing I'll say, having discernment with choosing the right partner. If you want to be a parent, you have to parent with someone else. We're not asexual. You can't create a child on your own, which means you have to create a child with someone else. Choosing the right partner is the first thing. Mm-hmm. Because regardless of how strong of a person you think you are, if the other person on the other side is not in alignment with what you want your child to be, there's always going to be friction. And the worst thing a child could see is the two people that created them go at it in a very radioactive and toxic manner. So I would say the first thing is have discernment with choosing a partner.
Mm-hmm. Nice, nice. What's the next thing you think you'll say to them?
The next thing I will say is be collaborative with your children on what they want their life to look like. Because we as parents have this idea of what we want our child to look like. My child's going to be 6'3" and he's going to play football, and I'm 5'11". Like, he may not be 6'3". You can wish it all you want. He may not be 6'3". But we have all these ideas of what we want our child to be. And when they choose something else, we as parents tend to show disappointment even if we don't say it. I've watched it with my wife. My wife grew up in a very strict Caribbean household. She has great parents, like super supportive, but they didn't understand getting into the entertainment industry. It was either you be in medicine or it was nothing else. Like it was just medicine, real estate, buy some property. So when she said she wanted to get into television, her father was just like, what you want to do that for? You can't make no money to do that for. And I watched my wife in college just have the light taken out of her because she didn't feel supported. Yeah. And it wasn't because her parents didn't believe in her. Her parents had their singular idea of what success looked like. And I would say my parents, conversely, didn't. My parents was just like, what do you want to do, bro? And I was like, I think I want to do this. I want this. And they were like, well, you got to try. And if you fall, I got you. My father, man, when I tell you my father is my freaking hero, I never felt alone in this world because no matter what I wanted to do, I always knew in like the back of my pops got me. And that's still now. Like I've gambled on things with investments and I'm like, if this don't work out, my pops got me. And, because I've been able to take that dive, I've been able to have success because I had room to gamble. Mm-hmm. And that's what I would say to parents, like, don't project what you want your kids to be on them. Let them figure it out and guide them through the process.
Nice. I love that. And speaking of with your wife, and then you have the book We Over Me, right? How has that really impacted you, the idea of we over me as a father and as a husband?
Oh man, that's impacted me so much, mainly because we all as people, individuals, think that, especially I know you, Mike, because you remind me a lot of myself. We feel like if there's a problem, I'll fix it. Yeah. I don't even need y'all. I got it. And I realized in getting married that my wife helped me become a better person, the same way I've helped her become a better person. which made me say, you know what? Let me be more collaborative of how I can be a better parent, right? If it's going to be we over me, it's going to have to be we over all three of us, including the child. So I'm no longer the dictator. Okay, I'm a man. I've been man my whole life. I know how to raise boys. Sit aside and watch. I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I did that when I was young, and it didn't work. Now it's like, baby, you think I was a little too hard on that? Like, do you think, like what was your perspective? What did you see that maybe I didn't see? And we bounce ideas off each other every night before we go to bed. I'm just like, we have 4 children, and there's always a problem every day. And I'm like, so you saw I helped with Cairo on that. You saw, did you think I was a little bit? And she was like, I think you could have. And then we'll discuss it, reconvene. We never argue in front of the kids. And then we'll come back later on and be like, after talking to your mom, we both feel as if, and we have a discussion about it. So that to me, I mean, we over me has just expanded into we over 6 because it's no longer just myself. I have to worry about 5 other human beings.
No, definitely. I love that. And before we go, we have 5 minutes left. How does Devale find time for himself, and what does that look like? Because we hear self-care a lot, but I feel like we put a feminine energy to it. But for you, how does self-care look, and Black mental health, all those things?
No, we do oftentimes, because of society, feel like men don't have to focus on self-care. I'll give you a quick story. Last year in November, by November, I did 3 seasons of television, 66 episodes of television. I had filmed 2 movies, and I had did 2 guest stars. I was exhausted. I had filmed 45 episodes of the podcast. We had did a podcast live tour. And I was just like, next month I'll be good. I walk off of set and I go into my room and I pass out.
Oh, wow.
My co-star, Crystal Renee Hazlett, finds me in the room. She calls the medic. I have to get medical attention. They're all focused on me. Dean wasn't there. She was in Jamaica. And at the time, I was so nervous. I thought I was having a stroke. I couldn't feel the lower part of my body. I was super dehydrated. I had lost 15 pounds over 5 days because I wasn't drinking or eating. I was always focused on the next. And I tell you that story because a friend of mine, Jamie Foxx, is going through something very similar. And we as men, especially creative men, never really find time to create a space for ourselves to be okay. We're always worried about somebody else. And I feel like it's okay for us as guys to say, babe, I need you right now. I just need you to take the kids for a little bit and just let me get an hour. Let me meditate. Let me get a couple days. Let me go get a massage. You know what I'm saying? Let me go on a quick vacation away. Like we really, really need that. And of course, it's seen as soft or feminine, which to me is like the most mind-boggling thing. But I also have another friend who's a Navy SEAL, and he told me that as a Navy SEAL, they train for months how to deal with sleep deprivation, because sleep deprivation can affect your body in ways that people don't know. How do we expect the most disciplined people in the world to train for sleep deprivation, but we expect the normal, ordinary man to just keep going? Think about that, Mike.
No, definitely.
We're sending people into battle and having them train for months on how to deal with sleep deprivation. But the normal dad, you got to deal with that every day. Go to work, be a dad, be a husband, be a friend, be a brother. It's not possible. We have to take better care of ourselves, or we're going to lose ourselves.
No, definitely. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And before we go, which has been a great time with you, when it comes to fatherhood, what's one word or phrase that comes to mind?
Legacy. That's it. That's all I ever think about of being a father is legacy. Like, what legacy am I going to leave for my sons and my wife when I'm gone? And how are they going to carry that legacy for their children? Because I'm a big believer in generational wealth. I'm a big believer in ending generational traumas, and that is all going to be involved in the legacy, not just the money. It's like creating a better human for the next generation.
Nice. I love that. Well, look, that's all the time we have for today. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I always hope the other person has as well, too.
Oh, absolutely, Mike. Whenever as long as it's you, I'm good. As long as it's our second time in like a matter of months, but I'm always
I know.
good. It's always a great conversation, man. I appreciate you, bro.